Ethan Parker was 40 when he crossed paths with Samantha, a vibrant 24-year-old whose presence seemed to brighten every space she entered. Their meeting was purely by chance. Ethan had stopped at a neighborhood cafe for his usual coffee fix, while Samantha sat near the window, sketching in her notebook, her golden hair gleaming in the soft morning sunlight. From the moment Ethan laid eyes on her, he was captivated. It had been years since he'd felt anything close to this, and the wave of emotions hit him with an almost boyish intensity. Samantha's boundless energy and positive outlook were magnetic, and her laughter had a way of lingering in the air, like a melody you couldn't shake. For Samantha, Ethan's self-assured demeanor and the way he made her feel seen and valued were irresistible. Their connection deepened quickly. Every outing together felt thrilling, every shared moment crackled with energy. Ethan, ever the practical type, found himself swept up in the intoxicating pull of new love, while Samantha, with her youthful idealism, was certain she had found a partner who would cherish her forever. Within a year, they were married. The ceremony was intimate yet sophisticated, and as Ethan watched Samantha glide down the aisle toward him, he couldn't help but think he'd hit life's jackpot. Samantha, too, was overcome with joy, feeling both safe and exhilarated as she embraced a future that seemed full of promise. The early days of their marriage were every bit as radiant as their courtship had been. But as the seasons changed, so did the texture of their relationship. Samantha, who had always thrived on whimsy and the thrill of the unexpected, began to feel stifled. It wasn't that she didn't love Ethan or the romance he offered, he provided those in abundance, it was the weight of the commitments and responsibilities that came with being a wife. As their first anniversary approached, Samantha found herself yearning for the simplicity of her former life. She missed impromptu nights out with her friends and the freedom of making choices without needing to consider anyone else. Her closest friends, still single and reveling in their independence, shared tales of their escapades and adventures that stirred a bittersweet nostalgia in her. Ethan couldn't ignore the shift in her demeanor. She laughed less often, spent more time scrolling on her phone, and seemed increasingly detached. Desperate to rekindle their spark, Ethan showered her with thoughtful gestures, bouquets of her favorite flowers, planned romantic weekends, and even cooking her go-to dishes after taking lessons. Though Samantha appreciated his efforts, a restlessness had taken root, one she couldn't seem to shake. Ethan, perceptive by nature, began to suspect that Samantha's struggles ran deeper than she let on. While she assured him she was merely adjusting to married life, he sensed that her free-spirited personality was at odds with the structured life they were now building together. The very qualities that had drawn him to her seemed to be clashing with the realities of their relationship. Samantha, meanwhile, grappled with how to express her emotions without appearing ungrateful. She loved Ethan deeply, but she also cherished the part of herself that thrived on autonomy. The practicalities of married life, shared responsibilities, domestic routines, and the need for constant compromise, felt like a weight on the wings that once carried her so freely. Seeking solace, Samantha drifted back into her old social circle. She spent more evenings with her single friends, who urged her to embrace life and rediscover the carefree version of herself they remembered. Although their encouragement came from a place of love, it only intensified Samantha's longing for the version of herself she felt slipping away. For Ethan, watching Samantha pull away was painful. He found himself questioning everything. Was this his fault? Or had he simply fallen for someone who wasn't ready to settle into the life they had envisioned together? One evening, Samantha planned to spend just a couple of hours with her friends at a cozy downtown wine bar, but time slipped through her fingers as laughter and conversation flowed effortlessly. Her closest friends, Madison, Abigail, and Natalie, were as lively and full of drama as ever, spinning stories and sharing opinions with the same fervor Samantha had always admired. Being with them felt like stepping back into a version of herself she desperately missed, a version she wasn't ready to let go of. The conversation started off light-hearted, bouncing between shared memories and updates on everyone's latest escapades. As usual, Madison stole the spotlight, her animated gestures and dramatic flair drawing everyone in. So there I was, Madison began, leaning forward as if revealing a juicy secret, texting both of them at the same time, trying to figure out who deserved my precious evening. And guess what? I ditched them both and hit the club instead. I needed a break from their drama. Laughter rippled through the group. Madison's tales were always a mix of chaos and comedy, and tonight was no exception. Freedom, Abigail sighed wistfully, swirling her glass of Chardonnay. That's what it's all about, living life on your own terms, doing whatever you please, whenever you please. Samantha forced a polite smile but stayed quiet. The word freedom echoed in her mind. Wasn't that what she had surrendered when she said, "I do"? But hadn't she gained so much in return? Security, love, partnership, weren't those supposed to be worth the trade? Abigail caught Samantha's silence and nudged her with a teasing grin. "All right, Mrs. Parker," she said playfully, "spill it. What's life like on the other side? How's married life treating you?" Samantha hesitated for a moment before replying, "It's good. Ethan's amazing, really. But, you know, marriage has its routines." Her voice sounded less enthusiastic than she intended. "Routines?" Madison repeated with mock horror. "Oh no, sweetheart, you're way too young for that." "Seriously," Natalie chimed in, shaking her head. "You're only, what, 25? You should be out there enjoying life, not settling into routines. Marriage can wait, you're still practically a kid." Samantha laughed nervously, trying to deflect the sting of their words. "It's not like I regret it or anything. Ethan's wonderful, and he loves me so much." "We're not doubting that," Abigail replied, leaning in as if to share a profound truth. "But marriage can be dull, sweetie. Trust me on this. You should have enjoyed your freedom a little longer before diving into all that serious, grown-up stuff." The comment cut deeper than Samantha expected. Was her life really dull? Had she rushed into marriage without fully considering what she might be giving up? As if sensing her inner turmoil, Madison leaned closer, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "You know," she said casually, "if things ever start feeling too routine, there's always the open marriage route." "The what?" Samantha asked, surprised by the suggestion but unable to hide her curiosity. "Oh, it's brilliant," Madison explained, her grin widening. "Basically, a couple agrees to take a break from exclusivity. You still stay married, but you get to explore other options. It's like hitting the refresh button on your relationship." Abigail nodded in agreement. "It's not for everyone, but my cousin swears by it. She said it completely revitalized her marriage. She and her husband are closer now than they've ever been." Samantha furrowed her brow. The idea felt so unconventional, so wrong, but at the same time, there was something intriguing about it. "Wait," she asked cautiously, "so they just decided to see other people? And it worked?" "Exactly," Madison said, her tone light and confident. "No sneaking around, no guilt, just honesty and freedom. It's like being single without the heartbreak and messy breakups." Natalie, always the pragmatic one, took a thoughtful sip of her wine. "Look, Samantha, it's not even about the marriage," she said. "It's about you. Do you really want to look back someday and regret not living your life to the fullest? Youth doesn't last forever, you know." The word struck Samantha harder than she cared to admit. She smiled awkwardly, trying to brush off the weight of the conversation, but deep down, a small seed of doubt had been planted. Her friends weren't entirely wrong, she had married young. Her life experience with relationships was limited, and with every passing day, the alternate paths she might have taken seemed to drift further out of reach. For the rest of the evening, the conversation drifted to lighter topics, but Samantha couldn't shake the thoughts swirling in her mind. Her friends' laughter and carefree attitudes only deepened the ache in her chest. By the time she was driving home, the idea of an open marriage was replaying in her head like a song she couldn't get out of her mind. It wasn't that she didn't love Ethan, she did, deeply. But for the first time, she found herself questioning if love alone was enough to keep her fulfilled. When Samantha walked into the quiet house, she found Ethan asleep on the couch, a book resting on his chest. She paused in the doorway, watching him for a moment. He looked so peaceful, so content in the life they had built together. Yet all she could think about was the lingering question her friends had planted: had she rushed into this? Had she made a mistake? Later that night, Samantha found herself staring at the faint glow of her laptop. She told herself she was just curious, just trying to understand the things Madison and the others had mentioned. But as the hours passed, she was still scrolling through articles and stories, her heart racing with each one. Some painted open marriages as liberating and exciting, a way to revive a relationship that had fallen into routine. Others were cautionary tales of jealousy, heartbreak, and unraveling bonds. The sheer variety of perspectives left her overwhelmed. She didn't know what she was looking for: a roadmap to happiness? An explanation for her restlessness? As dawn crept closer, Samantha shut the laptop with a sigh. Her thoughts were a tangled mess, and she decided to put the topic aside for now. Feeling exhausted but unsettled, she slipped into bed beside Ethan, careful not to disturb him. Staring at the ceiling, her mind raced with questions she couldn't answer. The days that followed were filled with unease. Samantha went through the motions of daily life, but her thoughts frequently wandered. Ethan, always attuned to her, noticed the change right away. "You've been quiet lately," he said one evening as they cleared the dinner table together. "Is something bothering you?" Samantha forced a smile, focusing on stacking the plates. "I'm fine," she said lightly. "Just feeling a little tired, that's all." Ethan studied her for a moment, concern etched across his face. "You'd tell me if something was wrong, right?" "Of course," she replied, brushing off his worry. "There's nothing to worry about." Though Ethan nodded, her words didn't entirely convince him. He knew Samantha well enough to sense when something was weighing on her, but he decided not to press the issue. Maybe she just needed a little space, he thought. A week later, Samantha received a call from Abigail inviting her to a birthday party. "It's going to be amazing." Abigail gushed over the phone. "Dinner at that fancy new French restaurant downtown, and after that, who knows? The night is full of possibilities." When Samantha mentioned the party to Ethan, she hesitated, unsure how he would react. To her surprise, he was completely supportive. "That sounds like a lot of fun," he said, smiling. "You should go. You've seemed a little stressed lately, and it might be nice to unwind." Relieved, Samantha hugged him. "Thanks, Ethan. I probably won't be home until late." "No worries," he replied. "Have a great time." When the evening of the party arrived, Samantha felt a small thrill of excitement as she got ready. She chose a sleek dress that hugged her figure just right, applied her makeup with extra care, and slipped on her favorite pair of heels. Ethan noticed her effort and gave her a warm smile. "You look stunning," he said, kissing her cheek. "Enjoy yourself tonight." "Thanks," Samantha replied, though a pang of guilt tugged at her. She wasn't doing anything wrong, but deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing at the edge of something that could change everything. Dinner at the restaurant was everything Abigail had promised. The food was exquisite, the drinks flowed freely, and the lively chatter created an atmosphere full of energy and laughter. Surrounded by her friends, Samantha found herself relaxing, swept up in the carefree joy of the evening. As the meal drew to a close, Abigail leaned back in her chair with a sly grin. "All right, ladies, the night's still young. Who's up for some dancing?" "Absolutely," Madison said, lifting her glass with enthusiasm. "We can't just call it a night after this." "I'm in," Natalie chimed in, her eyes sparkling. "Let's find a club and make it a night to remember." The table erupted in agreement, all except for Samantha, who hesitated. She had told Ethan she'd be home after dinner. A night out at a club hadn't been part of the plan, and the thought tugged at her conscience. Abigail, ever perceptive, noticed Samantha's hesitation and nudged her playfully. "Oh, come on, Samantha. You've earned the right to cut loose for a night. It's no big deal." "Seriously," Madison added, her tone insistent. "Don't overthink it, just say yes." Samantha bit her lip, torn between the temptation of the evening and the quiet sense of responsibility tugging at her. The idea of dancing until dawn, of embracing the moment and letting go, was undeniably appealing. But a small voice in her mind reminded her of the promises she had made. "I don't know," she started, her voice trailing off. Her friends leaned in, their faces lit with mischief, as if daring her to break free from the rules she'd set for herself. Samantha glanced down at her phone, debating whether to call Ethan. What would he think? Would he understand her need for spontaneity, or would he see it as a sign she was pulling away from their life together? She gripped her phone tightly, uncertainty flashing across her face. "I should call Ethan, just to let him know," she said softly, her voice nearly drowned out by the clatter of dishes being cleared from the table. The response from her friends was immediate, and loud. Madison threw her head back with a dramatic laugh. "Oh, come on, Samantha. Are you serious? What is this, high school? Do you need permission to stay out past curfew?" Natalie smirked, joining in. "Exactly. Is he going to ground you if you're not home on time?" The teasing hit a nerve, and Samantha felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. "It's not like that," she said defensively. "I just think it's polite to let him know." Abigail, the boldest of the group, leaned forward with an exaggerated pout. "Oh, how sweet. Polite little Samantha, always such a good wife. Always playing by the rules." Laughter erupted around the table, but Samantha's discomfort only grew. She wasn't upset with Ethan, but the way her friends framed it made her feel trapped, like she wasn't in control of her own choices. For a fleeting moment, she wondered if they had a point. Was she too tied down? Sensing her hesitation, Madison softened her approach, raising her hands as if in surrender. Okay, she said with a grin. "Go ahead, call him. Just tell him you'll be back in the morning. He might not love it, but it's your night, you decide how to spend it." Natalie nodded in agreement. "Exactly. Let him know it's just us girls. No guys, no drama, just harmless fun." The teasing resumed, light and playful, and Samantha forced a small smile. But their words had worked their way under her skin. She took a deep breath, steeling herself, and tapped Ethan's name on her phone. He answered on the first ring, his voice warm and familiar. "Hey, Samantha. Everything okay?" "Hi, Ethan," she began, hesitating as her friends watched her like hawks. "Dinner's been great. The girls want to hit a nightclub afterward and stay out a little longer." There was a brief pause on the other end, and Samantha could almost hear Ethan carefully considering his response. "A nightclub?" he asked slowly. "All night?" "Not all night," she replied quickly, though even to her own ears the words felt unconvincing. "Just for a little while. They think it'll be fun." Ethan's tone remained calm, but there was an edge of concern. "Samantha, I understand wanting to have fun, but isn't staying out all night at a club more of a single girl thing? It just doesn't seem like you." Her friends, overhearing her side of the conversation, exchanged knowing glances. Natalie rolled her eyes dramatically, mouthing, "Seriously?" Abigail mimicked a disapproving parent wagging a finger, while Madison gestured for Samantha to stand her ground, offering an encouraging thumbs up. Samantha felt herself shrinking under the weight of her friends' gazes. She tightened her grip on the phone and let out a frustrated sigh. "Ethan, seriously," she said, her tone sharper than she intended. "It's just one night out with my friends. I need this. It's been ages since I've done something for myself." "I get that," Ethan replied, his voice measured but laced with concern. But maybe I could come with you. We could turn it into a fun night together. The girls didn't even try to hide their reactions. Abigail dramatically rolled her eyes and muttered, "Buzzkill alert," while Madison snorted, struggling to hold back laughter. Their exaggerated antics emboldened Samantha. "Ethan, no," she said with a heavy sigh. "This isn't about you. It's about me needing a little space. I just need to feel like myself again, not just your wife." "Samantha, Ethan began, but she cut him off before he could finish. "Don't do this," she said, her voice rising with frustration. "I'm not asking for your permission. I'm just telling you what I'm doing. You don't have to act like some overbearing father trying to keep me in check." Ethan's tone shifted, more urgent now. "I'm not trying to control you, Samantha, but have you thought about how this might look? How it could?" "I don't need a lecture right now," she snapped, her words cutting him off mid-sentence. "Everything's fine. I'll be home in the morning." Before he could respond, she ended the call, her hands trembling as she lowered the phone. The table erupted in cheers, her friends clapping and raising their glasses. Madison grinned and lifted her drink in a toast to Samantha breaking free from Daddy Ethan's rules. Abigail laughed and chimed in, "Let's make it official, Daddy has no say after dark." Natalie grinned wickedly. "How about, Daddy's rules don't count when the clock strikes fun?" Their laughter filled the air, and despite the lingering knot of guilt in her chest, Samantha found herself smiling. For the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of exhilaration, a sense of rediscovery, as though she was reclaiming a piece of herself she'd forgotten. "All right, ladies," Abigail declared, rising from her chair and tossing a few bills onto the table. "Let's get to the club and show everyone what freedom looks like." As they stepped out of the restaurant, Samantha's emotions swirled, excitement mingled with unease and a trace of doubt she couldn't quite suppress. She pushed thoughts of Ethan and their argument to the back of her mind, letting the anticipation of the night ahead carry her forward. The music and lights of the nightclub seemed to beckon her, pulling her into the moment. The club pulsed with life, the beat of the music reverberating through the walls and colored lights dancing across the room. The dance floor was a sea of moving bodies, chaotic and mesmerizing all at once. Samantha paused at the entrance, momentarily overwhelmed by the pounding rhythm and flashing strobes. Abigail grabbed her hand, her face glowing with excitement. "Come on, Samantha," she yelled over the noise. "Tonight is all about having fun." The girls found a table near the bar, where drinks began flowing freely, and the energy of the room became infectious. Samantha laughed at Madison's outrageous jokes, smiled at Natalie's wild moves on the dance floor, and allowed herself to soak in the carefree atmosphere. For the first time in what felt like forever, she let her guard down. Madison, always the center of attention, quickly drew a crowd. A group of men approached their table, offering to buy shots for everyone. At first, Samantha hung back, nursing her cocktail and watching her friends flirt and dance. But as the night wore on, her defenses started to crumble. One of the men, a tall and self-assured guy named Ryan, eventually caught her attention. His confident demeanor and easy smile stood out, and Samantha couldn't help but feel drawn to him. Ryan wasn't like the others, he wasn't loud or overbearing. His smile was easygoing, and he carried himself with a calm confidence that instantly put Samantha at ease. "You don't seem like someone who comes to clubs often," he said, leaning in slightly to be heard over the pounding music. Samantha let out a nervous laugh, brushing a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "I'm not, really. My friends kind of dragged me out tonight." "Well," he replied with a grin, "I'm glad they did. You've definitely brightened up the place." The compliment caught her off guard, bringing a flush of color to her cheeks. She smiled, unsure of what to say. "It's harmless," she told herself. "Just small talk. Isn't he cute?" Abigail whispered, leaning close and nudging her playfully. "I think he's into you." Samantha shook her head quickly, laughing awkwardly. Abigail, I'm married, remember? Oh, relax, Natalie cut in, overhearing their exchange. You're not dead. It's just a little fun, no harm in that. Madison returned from the dance floor, her arms draped over a couple of guys she'd been dancing with. She caught the tail end of the conversation and chimed in, her tone teasing. You're overthinking it, Samantha. You're here to let loose, not analyze everything to death. And don't forget our earlier conversation, open marriage. It could totally work for you. The words seemed to echo in Samantha's mind as the night unfolded. At first, she tried to keep her distance, focusing on her drink and the music. But the buzz of the atmosphere, the alcohol, and her friend's persistent encouragement began to chip away at her resolve. So, when Ryan extended his hand and asked her to dance, she hesitated only briefly before taking it. Out on the dance floor, Samantha felt the weight of her worries start to slip away. Ryan wasn't pushy or overly forward, instead, he followed her lead, keeping their movements playful and light. Still, there was no mistaking the intensity in his gaze, it lingered just enough to make her pulse quicken. You're a great dancer, he said, his voice just low enough to cut through the music. So are you, Samantha replied, feeling her cheeks flush as she laughed softly. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt a surge of emotions she couldn't quite name, a mix of exhilaration, nervousness, and something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. It wasn't just about Ryan, though. It was about feeling wanted, about stepping outside the careful boundaries of her everyday life, and tasting a kind of freedom she hadn't realized she craved so deeply. At one point, their faces were so close she could feel his breath on her cheek. His hand brushed lightly against her arm, and their eyes met, locking in a moment that made her heart race. He leaned in, his intentions unmistakable, but Samantha turned her head at the last second. The near miss sent a jolt through her, a mix of relief and adrenaline. She laughed nervously, trying to brush it off, but the charge of the moment lingered long after. As the night wore on and dawn began to creep into the sky, the group started to wind down. Samantha, her cheeks flushed and her head light from the drinks, found herself scribbling her number onto a napkin for Ryan. He took it with a warm smile, tucking it into his pocket. You're amazing, he said, his voice sincere. I'd love to see you again. Samantha didn't respond, offering only a small, uncertain smile before turning back to her friends. The group piled into a cab, still buzzing from the night's energy, as the first rays of sunlight streaked the horizon. When Samantha slipped through the front door, the house was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. She kicked off her heels, ready to tiptoe upstairs, but froze in place when she saw Ethan sitting on the couch. His arms were crossed, and his expression was unreadable. Good morning, he said, his voice calm but tight with tension. You're home late. Samantha swallowed hard, the alcohol dulling her thoughts but not enough to shield her from the weight of the moment. We lost track of time, she said, her voice higher pitched than usual. Ethan stood, his expression steady, his gaze piercing. Did you have a good time? Samantha hesitated, the adrenaline and alcohol still clouding her mind. Yes, I had fun, she said cautiously. But, Ethan, I didn't do anything wrong. It was just dancing and hanging out with friends. Ethan opened his mouth to reply, but Samantha cut him off, her posture stiffening and her tone sharpening. Wait, she said, her voice firm, carrying an edge he hadn't heard before. We need to have a serious talk. Ethan blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. What are you talking about, Samantha? Crossing her arms, she lifted her chin in defiance. You can't control me, Ethan. I'm not a teenager. I make my own choices about my life. Ethan stared at her, his brow knitting in confusion and concern. Samantha, I'm not trying to control you, he said, his voice calm but tinged with disbelief. I'm just saying. No, Ethan, she interrupted, her voice rising. You don't get to decide for me. I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I've come to a conclusion. I'm done with this gray, monotonous life. I'm tired of feeling trapped, and I've made up my mind. I want us to have an open marriage. Ethan froze, the words hitting him like a blow. An open marriage? He repeated, his voice low and almost disbelieving. You're joking, right? I'm completely serious, Samantha said, her words spilling out in a rush. Just for a month. Think of it as a way to reset things, to bring some excitement back into our lives. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, letting her continue. I'm still young, Ethan, she went on, pacing the room now, her gestures animated. I have my whole life ahead of me. I don't want to spend it feeling boxed in. And let's be real, you're going to want a baby soon, right? And then what? I'll be stuck dealing with pregnancy for 9 months, then raising a child for years. My youth will disappear before I've even had a chance to enjoy it. Ethan's fists clenched at his sides, his knuckles widening as he fought to control the anger surging inside him. The woman standing in front of him, so bold, so dismissive of their life together, felt like a stranger. He wanted to shout, to demand how she could say such things after all they had shared. But the slight slur in her words and the flush on her cheeks reminded him she wasn't entirely herself. The alcohol, the late night, the influence of her friends, they were fueling her outburst. After a long moment, he exhaled slowly, his voice cold and deliberate. Samantha, you need to sleep this off. You're not in the right state to have this conversation. Her eyes flashed with anger, and she glared at him. What's that supposed to mean? She snapped. It means, Ethan said evenly, that you're not thinking clearly. We'll talk when you're sober. Without another word, he grabbed his jacket and car keys, walking out the door and leaving Samantha standing in the living room, fuming. Ethan drove through the still, quiet streets, his thoughts racing. Samantha's words played over and over in his mind, her accusations, her demands, her complete disregard for the life they had promised to build together. An open marriage? The very idea made his stomach turn. How did we get here? He thought back to their early days, when Samantha's youthful energy had been a breath of fresh air in his life. He had loved her spontaneity, her zest for life, her unwillingness to settle for anything less than her dreams. But now, those very traits seemed to be driving a wedge between them. To her, the life they had built wasn't a blessing, it was a cage. Maybe, Ethan thought grimly, they had rushed into marriage without fully understanding what they were committing to. Still, the pain of her words was impossible to ignore. She hadn't just questioned their marriage, she had dismissed the future he had dreamed of, the plans they had made together. Yet, as much as her behavior stung, Ethan knew acting impulsively wouldn't solve anything. If Samantha couldn't see the gravity of her actions on her own, he might need to find a way to make her see it. A plan began to take shape in Ethan's mind, one that would test Samantha's resolve and make her face the reality of the choices she was so eager to make. This wasn't about revenge. It was about teaching her a lesson she wouldn't easily forget. The next morning, tension hung in the air like a storm cloud over the Parker household. Samantha sat at the breakfast table, absent-mindedly stirring her coffee. She glanced at Ethan, who was calmly scrolling through the news on his tablet, his demeanor surprisingly composed. Clearing her throat, she broke the silence. Ethan, she started hesitantly, about last night. I know it was a heavy conversation, but I need an answer. Ethan set his tablet down, meeting her gaze with an unreadable expression. An answer, he repeated, though he already knew what she meant. Yes, Samantha said, her tone gaining strength. About the open marriage. I meant what I said, Ethan. I think this is what we need right now. Ethan leaned back in his chair, studying her carefully. You're certain about this? He asked. An open marriage isn't something you can just try on a whim. It changes everything. Samantha's heart pounded, but she nodded firmly. I've thought it through. This is what I want, a chance to breathe, to explore, to shake things up. Just for a month. Ethan exhaled slowly, as if weighing her words. Then, to Samantha's surprise, he nodded. All right. If this is what you want, I'm willing to try. Samantha blinked, startled by his unexpected agreement. Wait, you're okay with it? He gave a small shrug, his face betraying nothing. If you believe this will help us, I'll go along with it. But if we're doing this, there have to be rules. What are the boundaries? Rules? Samantha echoed, momentarily thrown off balance. Yes, Ethan said evenly. How do you see this working? What are the terms of this experiment? Samantha hesitated, caught off guard by his calmness. But she quickly regained her footing. Complete freedom, she said with newfound determination. Absolute freedom for both of us for 1 month. No restrictions, no questions. After that, we'll decide where we stand. Ethan tilted his head slightly, a faint, almost amused smile tugging at his lips. Absolute freedom for both of us. Yes, she replied, her voice steady. That's the only way this works. Ethan nodded again, the glint of something unreadable in his eyes. All right. Absolute freedom it is. You chose this, Samantha. I'll follow your rules. Just make sure this is really what you want. For a brief moment, his tone gave her pause, but she quickly brushed it aside. Relief and a thrill of excitement welled up inside her. I do, she said, her confidence growing. This is the right choice for us. Good, Ethan said simply, picking up his coffee. Then we start today. In the days that followed, Samantha found herself teetering between excitement and unease. Ethan's easy acceptance had smoothed over her initial doubts, but something about his calm demeanor nagged at her. She brushed the feeling aside, focusing instead on the exhilarating possibilities of her newfound freedom. When Ryan texted a few days later, asking if she'd like to join him for dinner, Samantha said yes without hesitation. The thought of seeing him again brought a rush of excitement she hadn't felt in years. On the evening of their date, Samantha took extra care as she got ready. She chose a dress that accentuated her figure, applied her makeup with precision, and spritzed on her favorite perfume. The fluttering in her stomach wasn't just about Ryan, it was about the thrill of stepping outside her routine, of doing something purely for herself. Ethan, sitting in the living room as she grabbed her purse, glanced up and gave her a faint smile. His expression remained unreadable. Have a good night, he said casually. Thanks, Samantha replied, keeping her tone light while avoiding his gaze for too long. A flicker of guilt passed through her, but she pushed it aside. This is for us, she told herself. This is what we need. The dinner with Ryan was everything she had hoped for. He was attentive and charming, showering her with compliments that made her feel radiant and desired. Over candlelight and wine, they talked and laughed like they were the only two people in the world. For a few blissful hours, Samantha felt like she was rediscovering a part of herself she thought she'd lost, a vibrant, confident version of herself that had been buried under the routines of married life. By the time the evening ended, Samantha was practically glowing. As they stood outside the restaurant, Ryan leaned in just enough to make her heart skip a beat. You're incredible, you know that, he said softly, his voice warm and sincere. Samantha blushed, her pulse quickening. She smiled shyly, unsure of what to say, letting the moment linger. Ryan gave her a knowing grin. I'd really like to see you again, he added, his tone full of quiet confidence. Maybe, she replied coyly, trying to keep her emotions in check, though the thrill of the evening still coursed through her. When Samantha stepped through the front door later that night, the warmth of her evening evaporated almost instantly. Sitting at the kitchen table was Ethan, and he wasn't alone. Across from him sat a stunning woman with dark, wavy hair that spilled effortlessly over her shoulders. She wore a fitted blouse that exuded elegance, her confident smile adding an air of poise. Samantha froze in the doorway, her purse slipping from her shoulder as her gaze darted between them. Ethan looked up, his expression calm, even casual. "Oh, you're home," he said smoothly. "Perfect timing. Samantha, this is Sophia." The woman turned to her with a polished, almost too perfect smile. "Hi, Samantha," she said warmly, her tone disarmingly friendly. "Ethan has told me so much about you. I think what you two are doing is amazing, so progressive and brave." Samantha's chest tightened as she struggled to process the scene unfolding before her. "Sophia," she managed, her voice barely audible. Who is she, Ethan?" Ethan leaned back in his chair, his demeanor unnervingly composed. "Sophia is someone I've been getting to know," he said, his voice smooth and unbothered. "We've been talking a lot these past few days. She's great, isn't she?" Sophia chuckled softly, resting her hand lightly on Ethan's arm. "You're too sweet," she said, shifting her gaze back to Samantha. "I hope you had a wonderful evening too." The room seemed to tilt. Samantha gripped the back of a chair to steady herself, her thoughts racing. She had expected Ethan to be hesitant, maybe even uncomfortable with the open marriage idea. But this was something entirely different. Ethan stood, escorting Sophia to the door with an air of confidence that made Samantha's stomach churn. "I'll see you in a few days, sweetheart," he said, leaning in to kiss Sophia on the cheek. "Can't wait," Sophia replied with a sly smile, glancing once more at Samantha before stepping out the door. As the door clicked shut, Ethan turned to face her, his expression calm yet unreadable. "So," he said, his tone almost neutral, "how was your evening?" Samantha gaped at him, her mouth opening and closing as she searched for the right words. It was fine," she finally stammered, her voice shaky with frustration and disbelief. "What was that?" "That," Ethan replied evenly, "was me playing by the rules." Her jaw tightened, her emotions bubbling to the surface. "You're flaunting it," she snapped. "You're doing this just to get back at me." Ethan raised an eyebrow, the faintest smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Am I?" he asked calmly. "Or am I just doing what you asked?" Absolute freedom, right? The tension between them was palpable, a live wire crackling with unspoken words. Samantha's emotions swirled, jealousy, anger, and something she couldn't quite name. She wanted to shout, to demand how he could be so indifferent, but the words caught in her throat. Ethan's composure didn't waver. "This is what you wanted, Samantha. I'm just following your lead." With that, he turned and headed upstairs, leaving her standing in the kitchen, seething. The next morning, Ethan's demeanor made the shift in their dynamic impossible to ignore. Usually, he would have coffee brewing before Samantha even came downstairs, greeting her with a warm smile, a kiss on the cheek, and perhaps a kind word. But today, the coffee pot sat empty, and Ethan was already dressed, his jacket slung over his shoulder as he headed for the door. "No coffee this morning?" Samantha asked, trying to keep her tone casual, though the emptiness of the counter stung more than she wanted to admit. Ethan glanced at her briefly, already reaching for his keys. "Oh, I didn't realize you wanted any," he said lightly. "I've got a busy day. See you later." Before she could respond, the door clicked shut behind him. Samantha stared at the empty space where he had been, her chest tightening. For years, Ethan's small, thoughtful gestures, like having coffee ready before she even woke up, had been a quiet but steady reminder of his care. Now, his sudden indifference felt like a slap. Over the following days, Ethan's distant behavior only intensified. He no longer seemed interested in their routines. There were no shared mornings, no affectionate moments, no light-hearted banter. Instead, he appeared entirely preoccupied with himself, spending an increasing amount of time on his phone, texting and laughing at things Samantha wasn't privy to. Jealousy began to creep in, an unfamiliar and uncomfortable emotion that gnawed at her. She found herself glancing at his phone every time it buzzed, wondering who could possibly be on the other end of the messages that brought a smile to his face. Her own attempts to distract herself, texting Ryan or meeting friends, felt hollow, failing to fill the growing void. One evening, Samantha came home to a dark, empty house. She called out for Ethan, her voice echoing in the stillness. Checking her phone, she saw a single text message waiting for her. "Ethan, Samantha, I'm out with an interesting group tonight. I'll be back in the morning." Below the text was a photo. Ethan was grinning, surrounded by a lively group of people at what appeared to be a nightclub. But Samantha's attention was immediately drawn to the blonde woman draped over his shoulder. Her arm rested casually around him, her body pressed close, and her smile was radiant. Beneath the photo, Ethan had added a caption, "This is Olivia. A very interesting woman. She's teaching me how to dance." Samantha's heart pounded, a mix of anger and hurt coursing through her. Her hands trembled as she immediately called him, desperate for answers. The call rang once, twice, 3 times, then went to voicemail. She tried again and again, each time met with the same cold silence. The realization hit her like a tidal wave: this is exactly how Ethan must have felt after Abigail's party. Now, she was the one sitting at home, waiting, stewing in a toxic blend of anxiety and resentment. The bitter irony twisted like a knife in her chest, and she couldn't ignore the ache of it. Overwhelmed, Samantha collapsed onto the couch, tears streaming down her face. The freedom she had fought so hard for, the thrill she thought would reignite her life, it all felt meaningless now. All she could think about was Ethan, out there with someone else, smiling and laughing in a way that used to be meant for her. The next morning, Samantha stood in the kitchen making breakfast when Ethan finally returned. He strolled in, his demeanor casual, and offered a cheerful "morning." Samantha didn't look up, keeping her focus on the stove. "How did you sleep?" he asked, his tone neutral, as if nothing had happened. She didn't respond, her jaw tightening as she flipped a pancake. "Samantha," Ethan said after a moment, his voice softer now. "Are you just going to ignore me?" Still, she said nothing. After a beat, Ethan sighed and muttered something under his breath about needing a shower before leaving the room. Later that day, Samantha met her friends at their usual spot, a cozy cafe filled with laughter and the hum of lively conversations. She wasted no time diving into the events of the past few days. "I told Ethan about the open marriage," she said, frustration lacing her voice. "And he agreed. But now he's spending time with this blonde woman, Olivia, and he's completely ignoring me. He even had another woman, Sophia, over at our house while I was gone. It's like he's enjoying this too much." Madison leaned back in her chair, her lips curling into a knowing smirk. "Classic midlife crisis," she said, shaking her head. "Give a man a little freedom, and suddenly he's acting like he's in his 20s again." "He's probably loving the attention," Abigail added with a frown. "Samantha, you need to turn the tables on him. If he's bringing women into his life, you've got every right to bring men into yours. Hell, invite them over if you want, let him see how it feels." Natalie, ever the blunt one, waved her hand dismissively. "Forget that. He's acting like a complete jerk, Samantha. He's using this as an excuse to fool around, not to fix anything. You should seriously think about divorce. You deserve way better." Samantha nodded slowly, her friend's words fanning the flames of her anger. For a brief moment, she imagined walking away from it all, leaving Ethan behind and starting fresh. But the thought of him happily continuing this new life without her, free of guilt or consequence, made her stomach churn. When the meeting with her friends ended, Samantha felt more resolute than ever. As soon as she got home, she picked up her phone and called Ryan. Her voice was steady, almost determined, as she asked, "Would you like to spend the night together tonight?" There was a pause on the other end of the line before Ryan finally replied, his tone hesitant. Tonight? I'd love to, but I'm kind of tied up right now." maybe another time. Samantha's chest tightened, and a pang of disappointment pierced through her. Tied up with what? She pressed, her voice sharper than she intended. Ryan stumbled over his words, mumbling something vague about work and prior commitments. The conversation ended abruptly, leaving Samantha feeling humiliated and unsettled. She tossed her phone onto the couch, frustration bubbling to the surface. When Samantha arrived home later that evening, she found Ethan sitting comfortably on the couch, a bowl of popcorn resting in his lap as he casually watched a movie. He looked entirely unbothered, his calm demeanor contrasting sharply with the turmoil churning inside her. "Hey," he said, glancing up briefly. "How was your day?" The nonchalance in his tone only fueled Samantha's anger. Her chest tightened as she snapped, "Ethan, how could you do this to me? You're nothing but a traitor." Ethan raised an eyebrow, setting the popcorn aside. "A traitor," he repeated, his tone measured and almost amused. "What exactly have I done to earn that title, Samantha? I'm just playing by the rules you set." Samantha's glare was fierce, her voice trembling with emotion. "You're flaunting it," she shouted. "Going out with these women, sending me pictures like it's all some kind of joke. You're supposed to love me, Ethan, not this." Ethan rose slowly from the couch, his movements deliberate. His expression was calm, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of something deeper, hurt, perhaps, or exhaustion. "You're the one who set the rules for this game, Samantha," he said, his voice low but steady. "You wanted freedom. You wanted to explore. And now that I'm doing exactly what you suggested, you're blaming me for it." Samantha's emotions surged, jealousy, frustration, regret, colliding in a chaotic storm. "I never thought you'd take it this far," she spat. "You're supposed to care about us, about me. Instead, you're out there parading around with these women like it's nothing." Ethan tilted his head slightly, his gaze steady but piercing. "You don't think it hurt when you came home late after dancing with strangers? Or when you told me our marriage wasn't enough for you?" His voice remained measured, but the weight of his words hit her like a punch to the gut. "You don't think it crushed me to hear you say you needed freedom because being my wife felt like a prison?" Samantha opened her mouth to respond but found no words. His calm yet cutting tone had left her speechless. "You wanted this, Samantha," Ethan continued, his voice softening just slightly. "And I've been trying to give you exactly what you asked for." Her lip trembled as tears welled up in her eyes. "I didn't think it would feel like this," she whispered, barely audible. Ethan's composure faltered for the first time. He took a step closer, his voice carrying a mix of exhaustion and pain. "How did you think it would feel?" he asked, his tone tinged with incredulity. "Did you think it would be fun? Easy? Did you think I wouldn't notice how distant you'd become, how you started looking at me like I was just another part of the routine?" Unable to meet his gaze, Samantha turned her face away. Her silence said more than words ever could. Ethan exhaled heavily, running a hand through his hair. "You know," he said quietly, his voice resigned, "maybe this isn't what you really wanted after all." For the next several days, the atmosphere in the house was thick with tension. They avoided each other as much as possible, exchanging only the most necessary words. Samantha tried to distract herself by texting Ryan, but his responses became shorter and less frequent until, eventually, they stopped altogether. She told herself it didn't matter, that she didn't need him. But the sting of rejection was undeniable, and the hollowness inside her only grew. Meanwhile, Ethan's absence grew more pronounced. He came home late most nights, and sometimes not at all. When he was around, he was distant, his attention always elsewhere. Samantha often caught him laughing at texts she couldn't see, his phone lighting up with photos of smiling faces, unfamiliar places, and lively group outings. Each glimpse sent a twist of unease through her stomach. One evening, Samantha walked into an empty house. A single text from Ethan greeted her. "Ethan, I'm out with Olivia tonight. Don't wait up." Her heart sank. This freedom she had pushed so hard for now felt like a force consuming her life. What she'd imagined, adventure, excitement, and liberation, had instead left her adrift and empty. For the first time, she began to question if she'd made a mistake far too big to repair. A week later, Samantha found the courage to confront Ethan. She caught him in the kitchen, casually assembling a sandwich. His composure, as always, seemed impenetrable. "Ethan," she began, her voice trembling. I think we need to talk." He glanced up from the counter, his expression neutral. "About what?" "This," she said, gesturing vaguely at the room. "Everything. The open marriage, the rules we set, it's not working. I thought it would help, but it didn't," Ethan finished for her, his tone calm yet firm. He set the knife down and turned to face her fully. "So, what are you saying, Samantha?" Her throat tightened, and the words came out in a whisper. "I'm saying, I want to end it. The open marriage. I want us to go back to the way things were." For a brief moment, Ethan's eyes softened, and she thought she saw a flicker of hope. But just as quickly, his expression hardened again. "The way things were," he repeated, his voice steady but cold. "You mean back to me trying to hold everything together while you pulled away? Back to me wondering if I was ever enough for you?" "No," Samantha said, shaking her head as tears spilled down her cheeks. "That's not what I mean. I've realized how wrong I was. I listened to the wrong people, and I made terrible choices. But I see it now, Ethan. I see how much I hurt you, and I'm so sorry." Ethan leaned back against the counter, crossing his arms, his face unreadable. "Samantha, do you know how many nights I stayed awake, wondering if you even loved me anymore? How many times I tried to pull us back together while you were already halfway out the door? I do love you," she cried, her voice breaking. "I've always loved you. I felt trapped. I didn't know how to handle it." Ethan sighed deeply, his shoulders slumping slightly as the weight of her words settled over him. "Samantha," he said quietly, "I don't think love is enough anymore. Not after everything we've been through." Her heart shattered at his words. "Please, Ethan," she whispered desperately. "Please don't give up on us." Ethan shook his head slowly, his eyes full of a sadness that matched her own. "I'm not giving up, Samantha. I'm just accepting the truth. Maybe we're not meant to be,